August 15th, 2021. Episode 13, Homecoming. 23rd day of Flame Rule. Weather forecast, cloudy skies, the streets are still wet from the rain. So, everyone assumedly knows it is the Lord's Alliance who is responsible for governing over much of the Sword Coast, the head of which is stationed in Waterdeep. And Waterdeep is said to be ruled by 12 mysterious masked lords, made unanimous by one open lord. This person is basically the face of their sovereignty and the one whom the people look to for order. The reason I bring all of this up is because of the Zentarum. Within the span of the few days we were gone, they seem to have made themselves a strong presence in Secomber. It was not only a surprise to come home to, but a bit concerning. That group directly opposes the Lord's Alliance, what with their strategic yet illicit efforts at achieving wealth and power. The fact that they had gained ground in our town while it was weak after the attack. Well, in retrospect, this situation would have likely have been the kind of opportunity they were waiting for. As we entered town, we took notice of the black and bronze serpent-like dragon sigil dawned over many crates and wagons, making it abundantly clear that as much as we may have not wanted them there, we were also in a much better position due to them showing up. It just left me to wonder, what were Lord Trescar-Slan's thoughts and opinions of them? I know I have heard rumors, or stories of him being criticized in the past, for allowing the Zentarum to move in on other neighboring towns without qualm or action. I had been stuck pondering this when I got a strange greeting from one of the guards at the gate. He knew me by name, and he made it a point to thank me. I kind of nodded back at him, puzzled by it, before just letting the whole thing slip from my mind altogether. Now that we were nestled back within the walls of Secomber, Leda Goldbean set out for his shop to start making antidotes. With our patron having departed, the party discussed our next move, with many of us deciding we had personal matters to attend to. The majority of us agreeing to split up and then meet back up later. I chose to accompany Moose with the goal of checking on Mincy. As the two of us made our way over to House Pompledy, another guard called out to me. This time I wasn't addressed by my name, but instead by the title, Gatekeeper, followed by more signs of camaraderie. I waved back, and attempted to return the excitement, but I found my gut churning with guilt as I looked back to Moose. The guards seemed to not only recognize me, but have taken a liking to me for mending the gate during the attack. It is flattering, truly it is, but they don't know that I regret doing that instead of staying by Moose's side. We made it to Moose's house. It was locked up tight and looked unfazed by the onslaught. Moose had her key on hand, so we were able to get inside, but Mincy was not there. Everything appeared undisturbed, except Moose noticed that some of her father's favorite items were missing. After looking around, we decided to leave and look elsewhere. While out, I asked Moose if she minded making a stop with me at my own house just to check on things. She agreed. So we headed that way next, but not before another guard began waving at me as we walked. When we arrived, we found signs of life having been there, such as my bed being made neatly. I felt the tension in my shoulders ease. That meant my father was okay. I had a feeling he would be all right. He can be pretty resourceful. I was certain it was him because he had also attempted to clean up, but unfortunately, he didn't show while we were there. The other good news was that the gold I had stowed away for our living expenses had gone untouched. Once satisfied with my look around, Moose and I decided to head to her uncle's shop next. We arrived to find his building damaged. The front door had been broken in and there was a closed sign nailed to it. Seeing that, prompted Moose to go use the back door of the shop. She knocked first, but ultimately, we got no response, so we just ended up heading in, calling out as she opened the door. Moose noted that the workshop appeared undisturbed before calling out again, but it was very quiet inside. The front of the shop was where the invaders had wreaked havoc. Display cases were smashed, some of the larger and shinier gems were missing. Though, a lot of the most valuable stones were still there, as if the looters hadn't known better, because clearly, those wretches are ignorant, and know nothing of worth. Moose continued to call out, jogging up the stairs to Lanzu's apartment door. The wood around the door had been splintered, as though someone had tried to use a crowbar to break in but failed. Moose managed to get the door open, but she was greeted with nothing but an empty room. With no sign of Mincy or Lanzu, Moose and I decided we would just head out to meet with the others. We ended up finding Kyrax first. She told us that the family she had been staying with hadn't been affected much by the attack, because they had been on the safer side of the river, thankfully. However, they were worried about the Zentarum showing up and costing them business. She also alluded to something else dealing with Melora's touch on all living beings, and how they might be allowed to thrive again, but I couldn't quite follow what she was trying to say, or maybe she was being vague. The three of us strolled through town for a bit, before finally running into a meandering Svend, who looked as though he had just been trying to kill time. I asked him if he had managed to accomplish anything while away. He kind of just shrugged off my question and answered with, "Just taking it in." I asked him to elaborate. I guess he was referring to the town. It sounded as though he had just been wandering around, trying to get a read on people's reactions to the Zentarum and everything else having to do with the attack. There was a lot of mixed reactions, with some people being happy the Zentarum showed up to strengthen Secomber during its weakened state, and with many others being concerned that they have appeared. All were on edge, and who could blame them after such an ambush? Most were dealing with it by staying busy, in the efforts to rebuild and repair. Now with the majority of the party reunited, we started to head towards the Temple of Yondola, where we had all agreed to meet up later on. Kyokyojo and Thane were already there, waiting outside the small end of the cornucopia-like structure. Neither one of them ready to share anything about what they had been up to. Later on, Kyokyojo did end up mentioning that he had implored his brother to try and do more for the town's repair efforts, asserting that the Zentarum should not be the ones taking the lead on this, as Secomber is the Kyokyojo clan's home, first and foremost. He also informed us that some of his family's caravans had gone missing, and so, his sister had been sent out on a mission to figure out what had happened to them. Now with everyone reunited, the six of us decided to head inside the temple, filing in behind a line of people. Yondola is known as a halfling deity whose main domain is community. You can find her depicted with shield in hand, over the large stained glass window located towards the back-end wall of the temple. Beneath that image of her is a fire, bringing warmth to all who enter. The feeling inside of this temple is comforting, whether that be from the various vines of fruit that hang about, the warm glow of floating orbs that provide light, or the fresh aroma of cedar that fills the space. As we made our way through the entrance, we could see the people ahead of us taking off their shoes and setting them aside, before stepping foot within the main area of the temple. Moose was standing just ahead of me in line, her head turning every which way in the hopes of finding something. I followed suit, my eyes darting up and landing on the large window of Yondola first. Below her and surrounding the fire I could spot about a dozen figures covered in white sheets. The bodies of those who had fallen. And hovering over them was a man in black robes. Aside from that, the temple was full to capacity. Just about everywhere you looked there were makeshift straw beds for the sick. It was a lot to take in upon first glance, and I might not have even noticed Mincy and Lanzu amongst the groups of people scurrying around, if Moose hadn't suddenly bolted from the line to run towards them. The rest of us watched from our spots in line as Mincy pulled Moose into a tight hug. I could feel my eyes grow a bit misty at the sight, but I managed to stifle myself. After a few minutes of filing inside, the rest of us made it over to Moose and her mother. Mincy went on to explain that her and Lanzu had been trying to help the sick here for the last few days. We began to explain to her the quest we had just been on. Mincy was pleased to hear that we had managed to gather the mushrooms needed for the antidotes. She asked if we knew when they would be ready. Since none of us had an answer, Kyrax offered to head over to Leda Goldbean's shop in order to speed up delivery. Svend offered to go with her as a second pair of hands. Moose looked to her mom and said she would stay behind at the temple to help Mincy. I agreed to do the same, and Thane decided he would stay behind as well, and help entertain the kids who were sick inside the temple. The last man standing was Kyokyojo, who had little interest in staying at the temple or helping to retrieve the antidotes. So, with that in mind, I suggested he head over to Ermir Wits and look for our next quest. Maybe he could find something that would be both helpful for the town, and benefit us by finally getting our license requirements done. He agreed, and so we all went about our own tasks for a while. After a bit of time passed, Kyrax and Svend returned with 3 full boxes of antidotes. Svend went on to brag about how we would have lost a third of our supply if he hadn't chosen to go with Kyrax. The story was that Mr. Goldbean had nearly dropped one of the boxes and Kyrax had dove too soon to catch it, but Svend had managed to make the catch, over top of her, with better timing. As we all continued to talk amongst ourselves and begin the process of handing over the antidotes, I couldn't help but get the sense that something was watching us. It was so strong in fact that it caused me to look up, and sure enough, I could spot where the feeling was coming from. The man in black robes had his eyes glued in our direction, but he didn't appear to be staring at me. No, his glare was fixated on Svend, and I wasn't the only one who noticed. I received a glance from Thane, who also seemed to gesture towards the man in black as a hint to me that he too had caught on. I didn't really know what to make of this, so I decided to nudge Svend and discreetly let him know. Looking back on it, I'm not sure that was the right move, because of course Svend would view a stare down from a stranger as some kind of challenge. And that is exactly what he did. He very obviously stared back at that man with his chest puffed out. He then referred to it as a mental battle. Thane and I both kind of sighed hopelessly over Sven's lack of tact, but thankfully, the robed man was far too busy to keep up with the staring match for long. Once that was over with, we began to set about distributing antidotes to all of those who were sick within the temple. As we made our way around, Mincy explained that once the people have had a chance to rest with the medicine now in their system, they would start to feel better and improve. As we approached those who had fallen, she informed us that Lord Slan had decided that the Midsummer Festival would instead be a time to honor those we have lost. I nodded in understanding and I was attempting to follow her, when I heard someone clear their throat behind me. I turned around to find Kyokyojo standing there before me, with an outstretched hand and a piece of paper in it. He had returned with several quest options for us. One of them involved returning the gold Chantier idol that we had found, after doing battle with the kobolds. Another had to do with raiding the Hark stronghold, and there was one more that seemed like our best bet for the next venture. I thanked him, but as usual, he acted as though he didn't care. I think he does appreciate gratitude though, even if he acts cool about it. From there, I made my way around the temple, looking for each one of my teammates to show them the next quest we were to take on. It involved a man who had been scammed into buying something, and his goal was to get his money back.
Speak to all of your party members as they do their idle actions before you can advance the plot, like the RPG games of old. Kyokyojo is standing in the middle of the room with his arms crossed. Siluca thanks him, and he answers with, "Yeah sure, whatever," before she runs off. Siluca approaches Kyrax, who is hanging over a table and is picking up one potion and then another. Siluca shows her the new quest from Kyokyojo, and Kyrax answers with, "Okay," and then goes back to handling potions. Svend is doing squats in one corner of the room when Siluca runs over and shows him the new quest from Kyokyojo, and he answers with, "Sounds good," and then goes back to doing squats. Thane is performing tricks for a small group of kids nearby, until Siluca steps up and shows him the new quest. He responds with a burst of magic that reads, "Okay," before Siluca runs off. Siluca chases a scurrying moose in circles around the room, to show her the new quest Kyokyojo brought them. Moose answers with, "You got it," and then we fade to black so the plot can advance.
Notes that Siluca doesn't or wouldn't know. In reference to what Kyrax was alluding to earlier, when Moose and Siluca ran into her during her free time, Kyrax set up a little shrine with rocks, and she began to meditate and pray there for a while. She became so in tune with her prayer and nature while doing this, that she was able to see through the nearby plants and animals. This allowed her to make the discovery of even tinier life forms, in other words, microorganisms. Now with her support, these tiny beings were inspired and driven to reach dead areas faster, and enable the plants in those areas to grow again.
Short story. Kyokyojo and Thane's Big Day. We find our hero Kyokyojo of the Kyojo clan, wandering the streets of Secomber after bravely handling the business of his family's name and house. And as he merrily strolls down the street, who should he happen to see? Why, if it isn't one of his fellow adventurers, Thane of course, who had just left his inn room and was on his way to the broker shop. Ah, yes, one of my up-and-coming comrades is heading towards the broker shop. Surely he can use my help and experience. I must assist him at once. Kyokyojo thought to himself, before calling out to Thane and trotting to catch up with him. Thane hears his name and spots Kyokyojo running up to him, and he attempts to quicken his step, but alas, it is too late. Kyokyojo is here, and he begins to ask Thane what he is doing with a smile. Thane sighs, and the two of them head into the broker shop together. Inside, two intimidating men are sitting at a table. One is a bronze dragonborn and the other is a young human with a black mohawk and a great axe. Thane remains on his guard as he steps up to the counter. Kyokyojo steps up, unafraid. These ruffians are of no importance to him. Nor is the slender, middle-aged half-elf, with judging eyes behind the counter. Kyokyojo lays witness to Thane offering up a cloak and paying the man for an identify spell, only to have him told that it isn't a magical item he can use. It is known as the nature mantle, and it is a camouflaging cloak. Those who are more attuned to nature could make better use of such a thing. Thane is then offered 2,000 gold for it, but, unsurprisingly, he chooses not to sell. If this Algoris Ergo fellow was able to explain the cloak to Thane, perhaps he may be able to help me with my own magic inquiry. And with this thought in mind, Kyokyojo offers up the magical orb from his sword onto the table, along with the same amount of money Thane paid for his identify spell. Algoris picks up the orb and turns it once in his hand. He then goes on to say that it is just an ordinary arcane focus sphere before setting it down. Kyokyojo snatches up his orb and calls the shop owner a thief before turning on his heel to head out. Thane is standing by and watching until Kyokyojo turns on him next and demands that Thane storm out of the shop with him. Thane sighs heavily and heads towards the door too, but he pauses when he sees Kyokyojo staring at the two intimidating men playing cards. A game of cards? I'm sure I could wipe the floor with these two, but then that would leave poor Thane to travel through town without me. I guess another time. Thane clearly needs me. Kyokyojo thought to himself before walking out of the shop after Thane. Once back outside, the two of them spot a third comrade. Why, if it isn't the apprentice swordsman Sven, walking across the street? Kyokyojo calls out to him. Sven questions them loudly about what shop the two of them were just in. Oh, that's right, poor Sven is of the illiterate sort. I should read to him what the words of this shop say so he knows, Kyokyojo thinks to himself. Thane is about to speak when Kyokyojo shouts the words, magical items, across the street towards Sven. Thane sighs again. Kyokyojo then tells Sven to meet them at the temple as Sven heads the other way. Perhaps his hearing isn't the greatest? Or maybe he is unsure of where it is. Oh well, I'm already helping Thane out, so Sven is on his own. I wish him luck. Kyokyojo thought to himself as the two comrades began to make their way through town in silence. That silence continued until they reached the area of the toy store. The sound of a kid hollering at Thane reaches the two's ears, and Kyokyojo responds with a side-mouthed comment of, "Now make that kid disappear." More are soon to follow, as a herd of children run over to the two adventurers. Thane decides to impress them by making one of the kids' scarves fly around and turn into an animal. It then flies back into the kid's hands, and with a sparkle, it goes back to being a scarf. The children begin to throw copper coins at Thane's feet in excitement, so Thane makes the coins look as though they are turning into fairies. Kyokyojo answers back with, "But what if they want their money back?" as Thane rolls his eyes. Finally, after an exciting journey through town together, Kyokyojo and Thane make it to the Temple of Yondola, in the hopes that the rest of their friends will show their faces soon. The end.